Jason, I think we had our first conversation going back probably 6, 7 years ago when you were with Gastrograph, your other company you founded. And I just remember your origin story being like this really almost savantish tea taster in China. Like, and there is a circuitous path to your career in AI and food, but how'd you get started in food and tea?
There is a circuitous path. So I find most people come to the food industry, particularly the food technology industry, out of the technology side. I actually came out of it from the food side. So I was sent to China to study politics in 2007 when I was quite young. I started university early. Turns out blonde hair, blue eyes, bad Chinese doesn't like really endear you to asking about the government and studying politics in rural southwestern China and in Yunnan province. So I was told in no uncertain terms to stop doing that, and wound up hanging out in the tea market, originally out of a mix of interest in practicing Chinese. And this wonderful group of gentlemen allowed me to sit with them and taste tea, and they would just quiz me nonstop. Where do you think this tea is from? Which of these teas is better? What side of the mountain is this from? And pretty quickly I realized there was something more going on here. And they kept me around. They thought that I was hilarious because when I would say, they would ask me a question if I didn't understand. My Chinese was still quite poor. I would say "wo budong" instead of "ting budong," so it was like saying, "I don't know if this tea exists." So they thought I was an existentialist, and they kept me around. But that turned out to be Jihai, the fermentation master of CN&P, which was the communist era tea conglomerate for pu'er tea. And so I got very deeply into it there. And then I went to live on a tea plantation in India, Makabari tea plantation, the following year in 2008. And then I continued my study of tea, took a really long walk from Guangzhou, China, through Tibet and Nepal into India, visiting tea places and people I'd worked with. And so then I went to Penn State, originally on a political science fellowship program, which I promptly did nothing in. Instead, I started a tea research group like everything I touched, kind of spiraled out of control, became a tea research institute. And I started my doing research on flavor, quantifying what people taste in products and what people like and dislike, realized that had applications in industry.
Mm.
So after 4 years of running the research institute, I spun that technology out into a company that became Gastrograph AI. And I was founder CEO there for 10 years. That's a successful company, still strongly support them. I'm still on the board. But it became very, very clear to me in 2022 or so that generative AI was going to change what's possible to achieve in consumer research. And so I stepped up to a board role there in order to start a new company focused on
Mm.
using new techniques in generative AI, which is what led me to found Simulacra.
Well, I just love how you kept trying to do politics, but like food just kept pulling you back, and the TD Institute. That's such a great
It's
story.
a lot more friendly of an industry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you saw what was happening with generative AI, and it made you really kind of rethink what you needed to do, and made you actually leave your previous company and start this new one. Talk about that. Like when you first started thinking about generative AI seriously a couple years ago, how and what was your thoughts? Like, oh man, this is going to change everything. Tell us a little bit about your thinking.
So in the early days, I mean, I had always been a skeptic. I had been a long term skeptic of the use of traditional neural networks and deep learning models. I thought that the levels of classifications were interesting for areas where you had huge data sets and you could easily train things at something like Google scale. But where I really specialized was in consumer research, which is always small data. It's expensive data. It's difficult to collect data. You're lucky if you get 30, 40 observations on a product that's under development. You can't train a deep learning model on that. So I was very skeptical of the idea of using neural networks and other types of deep learning techniques for consumer research. Where I became originally interested in this idea as well, if we have mixed text pairings and if we have mixed flavor profiles, can we generate textual reviews where we can create user personas, user profiles, and say, oh, well, Beer Bro Brett, that's not a reference to anything political. Beer Bro Brett loves beer, and he says about this specific beer, I like it, it's crisp, it's light, it's fizzy, right? And Sour Janet says, I love sour beers, and this isn't a sour beer, and I don't like it. And, Negative Nancy says, ooh, it's bitter. And can you create these types of textual personas? At the time, the type of Markov chain modeling didn't work well enough to productionize it, but that's what originally got me interested in this idea. Well, you don't need you need the huge data sets for training, but you don't need huge data sets at inference time. And so maybe there's actually something that you can do in generative AI for coming up with ideas or coming up with profiles that would otherwise be expensive to collect. And Gastrograph actually did implement some of that. Our optimization algorithms were based on generative AI, and so we had been using it quite a bit longer than the current zeitgeist, which is focused on LLMs, obviously, and diffusion models and image generation. So what the moment that the switch flipped, where it became clear that something new was possible, was with the release of Midjourney. And so if you can generate images based on a text to image prompt, based on saying series of labels that can turn into an image, like I want an image of a woman in a white dress, a woman in a white dress in a forest, a woman in a white dress in a forest holding an apple. If you can do that with imagery, you should be able to do that with tabular business data. And you should be able to make that conform to rules, just as the
Mm.
apple is a set of rules, the woman is a set of rules, the white dress is a set of rules. And that was the moment where it became, okay, this is real, and this is something that we can do now that will provide value now. And that's been quite an interesting response, because as much as now people are used to the idea of saying like, oh well, sure, AI, maybe it can generate some pretty good text, or sure, it can generate some realistic images, can it really generate my business data? And like, yeah, your business data, your consumer research is really not that different from anyone else's, right? You have some specific things that are unique to your products, but that's not a question of training. That's a question of inference, and there's enough data there to make that type of
Mm.
inference.
So is it essentially related to, or a kind of a digital twin that we're talking about here, that you're creating essentially a bunch of digital twins to then, or when you're saying you're inferring, you're just creating wholly new. They're not a digital twin in that it's a replica of like someone else to
Yeah,
then test on. Is It's essentially creating wholly new personas.
exactly. There's a couple of companies out there that are using digital twin technology, and various things can be called digital twin technology. Digital twin technology, I generally find to be more around mapping specific data sets to specific personas, and then using those personas to say we're not going to need to sample these types of people anymore. What we're trying to do is quite a bit different than that. It's looking at survey data, where your surveys could be 100, it could be 100,000 observations of specific questions, where people are saying, definitely would buy, would definitely would not buy, or those types of response questions paired with usually demographics and some types of behavioral. This person buys Lay's potato chips. This person buys Coca-Cola. And taking that type of data and synthetically generating either more data or integrating new knowledge into it and saying, well, we know that the ratio between Coke and Pepsi's been losing market share year on year. Coke's been growing, Dr. Pepper has been growing. Show me what this data would look like if that knowledge was included today. Show me what that would look like if we actually had properly surveyed the correct ratios, given known sales volume, which is exogenous to this data. And so it's much more mathematically accurate. It's much more correct for drawing direct statistical inference. And it's actually giving you back tabular data. It's giving you back quantitative or categorical data that you can run statistics on. It's not giving you back LLM style textual output, which then someone reads and maybe draws some inspiration from.
Do we also use it to, because I remember with Gastrograph, you would essentially say, hey, someone wants to create a wholly new product. And you'd say, hey, let's create a product that maybe resonates with millennials in this demographic who like spicy food or whatever. Just making this up. But like, are you one of the main use cases would be CPGs early in the development process saying, hey, I want to try out a new concept, or give me some new concepts for food that could be an extension of an existing product. Talk about how you're seeing companies use
Yeah.
this.
So I guess the interesting thing, so Gastrograph was a proprietary data play, and it was highly specialized proprietary data play. So Gastrograph worked because we collected a proprietary data set from 35 countries, 45 regions, tens of thousands of people on 100,000 products, close to a couple 100,000 observations across our 10, 11 years of collecting data. And so we didn't use this language at the time, but really what we were doing is we were building a foundation model for flavor. And that allowed us to micro target and really specifically predict for new combinations of flavor, for new emerging preferences, or for different types of preferences that people would like. What we're doing at Simulacra is very different than that. We are taking a no data approach. We are saying actually Simulacra has absolutely no data. It's a bring your own data company. So a company
Hmm.
like Coke or Pepsi, who already is sitting on tens of thousands of consumer research questions, tens of thousands of surveys that they've run on things that are specific or unique to the types of products that they're trying to develop, or the type of marketing that they're trying to do, or the type of supply chain problems or purchasing intent, purchasing behavior that they see amongst their consumers. They can put that data into our system and then update it, modify it, run scenario models on it. And so it's much more general than gastrograph, but it's also much less specific. So we have companies putting in everything from pricing and promo data from Nielsen's or IRI in order to run price elasticity surveys, in order to run pricing scenario models, in order to predict what happens if their competitor raises or lowers their price versus what happens if they raise or lower their own price. And we have companies putting in QDA data to do sensory level optimizations on it. And we have companies putting in non-CPG marketing data. So things like if we run an ad on these networks, what's the expected response rate? What's the value for the dollar? What's the ROI? Which of our claims are actually resonating? Should we talk about this product being low fat? Should we talk about this product being more affordable? Should we talk about buy one get one free? What actually resonates with the market that we're targeting, given this advertising market?
So your model, talk about what it is. It's not an LLM in the way we've heard about them from kind of the zeitgeist, as you said. You say it's a no data data. How are you building an AI that understands how to take any sort of data set from a various product company and then spit out insights that they will find valuable in a predictive
Yeah.
in a predictive sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually kind of synthetic data generation turns a lot about what we think about models on its head. So, we're used to thinking in terms of dependent and independent variables, where we're going to take these factors and we're going to regress them, or we're going to model them in order to predict how do we, what happens if we pull this lever? Do sales go up or down? That kind of thing. The ability for synthetic data generation, which is in our case is predominantly built out of diffusion model technology, is that idea where every variable predicts every other variable. And some predictions are obviously stronger, some predictions are weaker. But what it means is, if you think about that classic neural network diagram where all of the nodes connect with all of the nodes, really what you're saying is that all variables are dependent variables, all variables are independent variables, and you're going to cascade those predictions throughout your entire network. And so what it's doing is it's actually learning a causal chain of reasoning from the data that you upload. And what's different about this is that we didn't build an AI trained on data, trained on your data, that has learned something exogenous to your data that's going to add this information. What we did is we built an AI that learns to build a synthetic data generation model on whatever data is uploaded. So we actually built an AI to build a model. And that model is unique to every individual data set that gets uploaded, which is what allows it to work correctly, accurately on very specific data sets, on very diverse data sets. There are some limitations, obviously. We can't deal with free-form text data. The data needs to be tabular, rows are observations, columns are variables. But beyond that, any type of mixed categorical and numeric data, the AI takes that, learns what's called zero shot. So it trains and updates itself zero shot on that specific data set. And then each customer gets their own custom proprietary model specifically on the data set that they uploaded, which is available to them and only to them for as long as they're using the system. And we don't save any data on our system. We're the only generative AI company that I know of that does not save data. So actually, any data they upload, any data that they generate, is only available to them in a single tenant container for as long as they're using it, and then the whole thing's deleted when they're done.
And I would imagine they are, if they're using this proprietary data in their company, in their development labs, are you giving them like just a dashboard? Is it a software as a service? How are they interacting with the data?
It is a software as a service. We think of it, there is a dashboard component. They're interacting with it by updating parameters and looking at outputs. But really, the idea is that they're going to move the data off of our system as fast as possible. They're going to upload data. They're going to add some information parameters. They're going to run some scenario models. And when they're happy with those results, they're going to click download, and they're going to take all of that data and put it into their own reporting infrastructure, their own business intelligence tools. Any of these major enterprises already have systems now for data warehousing, for data analysis and for their own types of persistent dashboards. We're not trying to replace that. What we're trying to do is reduce the amount of data they need to run that, allow them to run scenario models and generate data without going back to running new surveys out on the market, and to be able to do future case predictions. If they have data from 2021, 2022, 2023, can we predict for 2024? Can we predict for 2024 under changing market conditions? They should be able to parameterize that, generate a data set as if it was 2024 with those conditions, and then put that into their business intelligence reporting infrastructure that they have internally, and use that to make better decisions, better business intelligence decisions for whatever it is that they're trying to achieve.
So, what are some common business intelligence decisions they're doing? Is it primarily for product development? What are some of the applications you're seeing?
Yeah, the three big ones are consumer response marketing. So looking at claims in consumer surveys and where customers are saying, I would buy this, I would not buy this. Very similar to, say, like Bases 2 type of data. That's number one. And I would say these are all 30, 30, 30. Number two is very interesting because we didn't expect this when we started the company, is pricing and promo data. So taking the amount of products sold at every store, at every price point, with any promotions that are going on, and inputting that into the system. So each product has 52 observations times the number of stores times the number of price points. So you get into some relatively large data pretty fast. Customers are uploading anywhere from 80 to 120, 130,000 observations on a set of their products and competitors' products. And from that, they can run price elasticity modeling. So they could say, what would happen if we increased our price by a penny, by 2 pennies, by 10 cents? What would
Hmm.
happen if our competitor increased their price by 10 cents? Would customers trade off? Is that enough to make a customer move from a competitor's product, say Oreo, to Wegmans? 10 cents, probably not. 50 cents, you're going to start to see some shifts. And then the third one is advertising and marketing. So brand attribution and brand claims, things like this media market types of purchases. So brand attributes. I find this brand trustable. I think that this brand is natural. I think that this brand is healthy. I think that this brand is good for children. So do those types of brand attributes and have resonance to your target media markets? That one was also a little bit surprised. We didn't have prior experience in the media industry. Um, there is a little bit of there's a couple customers putting in QDA data and using it for product attribute optimization, but we're not really competitive with Gastrograph. If you want novel new flavors, definitely talk to the Gastrograph team. If you're looking at high top level QDA data saying is the amount of sugar okay, you can do very quick scenario modeling and testing on simulacra.
Very cool. So, how do you think your type of product and more generally generative AI is going to change food development and food distribution, et cetera, over the next few years? It seems like it takes forever to bring a product to market, and then like change is slow. Do you see this making a big difference over time?
I do. I mean, if you think about the journey of Gastrograph, Gastrograph took uh, quite a long time. 6, 7, 8 years. Probably, I would only say that it's been institutionalized as the market leader in the last 10 years with its Nielsen's IQ and IQ partnership. The amount of time that it takes in order to get the food industry, which is both a technology powered industry but also an industry that needs to produce a physical product, needs to be a safe physical product, needs to distribute that physical product, needs to make people aware of that product, is a long road. These companies are good at what they do. They're good at distribution. They're good at commanding attention. But the failure rates on new product development is very high, and it's because if it's easy to get someone to taste the product once. It's difficult to make someone purchase something that they didn't like the flavor of, and flavor is notoriously difficult to quantify. And those are issues that Gastrograph addressed head on. I think where Simulacra is going to make a big impact is we've seen the market fracture, and we've seen a greater number of consumer cohorts than there had previously been. It used to be possible to make a single regional product, a single national product, an international product, right? Everyone knows Budweiser tastes approximately the same around the world. Coca-Cola tastes approximately the same around the world. Now there's differences in sugar and black box sweetener systems and all of this. But, the core product was originally, the idea was that one product for the entire world. That's not really possible anymore. And so you have all of this fractured different consumer segments where people in New York City, you're going to have 10 different consumer segments instead of a single consumer segment. And that makes traditional consumer research, traditional market research unaffordable. And so what we've seen companies doing is actually reducing the amount of research that they're doing. They're doing smaller sample sizes. They're not getting statistical power. They're making ad hoc assessments based on either gut feel or directional data that would never pass a statistical test. And that's an area that I think Simulacra can bring accuracy and data driven decisions and predictive power back to a market that has kind of lost the trust of the executive teams. The executive teams are thinking about data in aggregate and shots on goal and what proportion of their innovation is actually going to win and what's going to return ROI. But right now, it's basically a Hollywood situation where you're going to produce the studio is going to produce somewhere between 5 and 10 movies this year, and one movie is going to return the fund. It's going to make the all of the profit for the studio, and the other movies are either going to break even or lose money. But there's no reason that that should be the case in the food industry, in the CPG industry generally. You should be able to make predictions around consumer behaviors, what consumers are going to prefer, what consumers are going to do, and what's going to resonate. And you could do that if it was affordable to do so across all of these different cohorts and behavioral
Mm.
patterns in this fractured consumer market. And that's where Simulacra is really going to make an impact.
Think through a scenario with me. 10 years from now, everyone's using this type of thing, type of synthetic data, somebody data to power their decisions. They're doing it earlier in the process with gastrograph. How does that it can't be that all the shots on goal become successful. So I can see in a market where one company's using this and their shots on goal percentage goes way up. But if everyone's using it, what does that mean? Does like that mean okay? It starts to bend the market a little bit, and like people maybe are doing less products. Talk about that scenario. What happens?
That's a great question. On the gastrograph side, so we used to get asked this: will gastrograph make our products taste the same as our competitors' products, or would if two competitors are using this, will we wind up with the same formula? And the answer in the gastrograph case is of course not, because you have different constraints, you have different targets, you're going to make different demographic decisions. One company is going to do 50%, 50-50 men, women. One company is going to do 60-40 men, women. One company is going to say we want more individuals that cross purchase with our chips, and the other is going to say we don't want this to compete with our lemon lime products. And so you actually wind up with pretty different constraints, even if they were running purely on the gastrograph trunk data set, the core gastrograph data set, without adding in their own data. Simulacra, because it's bring your own data, is going to be even more extreme version of that. So with Simulacra, you're going to see companies that have very good, very detailed research, companies that spend upwards of 80, 90, $100,000 on targeted research. They're going to have 3, 4, 500 different consumers. They're going to have had them taste 10 to 20 different products over the course of 5-6 days. They're going to have done multi-site testing, like in Chicago and in Kansas City and in Texas. And you're going to have companies that come to us that say, that are scrappy, that say, we ran a 100-person survey in New York City on this new chip we're trying to bring to market for the New York, local distribution, New York market, small startup company. Can you turn this 100 people into something that we can actually make decisions out of? And those, without even needing to really describe it, that they're going to get different outcomes, different outputs from
Mm.
Simulacra. Simulacra is not going to be able to predict the entire United States for that 100-person survey, of course, but it will accurately be able to find the different cohorts that they surveyed in New York City, at least people willing to turn up to taste chips at a startup company. Versus that larger survey, you're going to be able to dive into complex difference in demographics across the United States and different behaviors across the United States. So the idea that this technology is going to be a convergent force across different product development cycles, I don't think that's the case. I think that these companies are already so different. Even companies that are direct competitors are already so different. If you think about Pepsi and the ability to cross sell with chips and snack products, right? The Frito-Lay side of the company versus Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
That's now even done some alcohol collaboration, Jack and Coke and other things. Right? Those are just totally different worlds, despite some of their products being head-to-head competitors. And the types of flavors and the types of offerings and the type of marketing that they're going to do are going to be very different because of that.
Well, Jason, I'm excited to see you in about a month in Berkeley at the Food AI Summit. This has been great. It's been fun following your journey.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be there.